If you haven't heard of GPT or ChatGPT before, I really think you should. This for me is a game-changing technology. It's pretty simple to use. I've been using it over the festive period. It's essentially like a very, very clever chat bot. It's basically an AI that creates human-like text, and it's scary how accurate it is. Peter, I'm joined by you today because I was intrigued by a note you sent to your investment team a couple of weeks back, where you called out that you'd used an AI language programming tool to write some of the note. So I know you're interested in this area, which is why I wanted you on today. Can we start off with how this thing works?
Yeah, so from a user perspective, it's pretty simple. You basically type in a question that you would like answered. It can do some pretty high quality content in seconds. Some of these questions can be, write me an article about X. You can use an example of write me a series of The Sopranos, but using Simpsons characters. What I used it for specifically, Shane, the reference that you referred to, is I had to write a sort of end of year email to the team, which I wrote. And then I decided it wasn't quite long enough, and I don't really like writing. So I went onto this system and I said, can you please write me 200 words for a team that's been high performing in investments and motivational for the year forward? And it produced pretty good text, which I copied and pasted and put into an email with a disclaimer to say some of this email had been generated by a computer program. It's not actually connected to the internet, so it's only going to use data up until the end of 2021, but it's continuously learning and improving.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that email that you wrote, I actually couldn't detect which bit was AI and which bit wasn't, which kind of tells you how good it is. I mean, it sounds pretty groundbreaking. As I say, this for me is a game changer because it disrupts all sorts of things. Who owns this technology?
So it's created by a company called OpenAI, which is a not-for-profit research organization. Elon Musk was actually originally involved in it, but I think stepped back in about 2015. And I know that they do get funding, and one of the key funders of this organization is actually Microsoft, which potentially could open up the arguments to say, you know, they're probably not doing it entirely for charitable purposes, and I think it will find ways for them to compete with other technology companies such as Google in search.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's what the media has picked up on. I mean, there's been a lot of talk around this disrupting the business model for Google, because obviously if you've got something like this, which can give you very clear answers using all sorts of sources, it's going to be a challenger to the Google model. As you say, it's not live yet, but if it did get plugged into the internet at some point in the future, it could be pretty powerful. I mean, what does all this mean, do you think, for the future of investing and maybe even more broadly, the future of the world?
Yeah. So when you look at it, at investments, what you are always looking for is, first of all, value. You're looking at existing businesses. You're looking for thematics. But you've also got to be alert to disruptive technologies, which could unearth and really have an impact on either existing businesses or create entire new businesses that you haven't quite thought about. So the internet, for example, would be a key example as a disruptive technology, which has had enormous change in both how we live, but on how we and on how we work and on how we invest. Now, do I think this is as big as the internet? I don't know, but it's certainly got the potential to have huge impacts. I mean, straight away you can see that it's going to have an impact on media, journalists, script writers, people who write reports on fun fact sheets. So, you know, one for you to consider for your future employment prospects, Shane. I mean, the way I would put this is we've been using quantitative tools in investment for years, working with numbers. And here what you have is a quantitative tool effectively working with language. And I think it will provide people like me who don't like writing with an easy option regularly, so we can focus on things that we really want to do. But I think it's difficult to predict exactly where this will go in the future, but I think it's going to be highly disruptive.
Agreed. That's why we're moving away from written text, Peter. That's why we're doing videos every week. So, I mean, my final question just before we conclude, does this excite you or does it scare you? Because I can see both sides of this argument.
So I think it does both. So it excites me there in terms of other tasks that I can now automate so that I can focus on things that I really enjoy and really want to do. And it's like if you have to write a piece, or for example, you're doing an offsite with your team, coming up with the initial agenda is always, starting with that blank piece of paper is difficult, but this will actually create the agenda for you, and then you can spend a lot less time editing it and adjusting it. I think that's great. I think it's going to be really difficult to persuade some of our younger generations to actually learn, because it's almost like we've had a calculator to help with maths, and therefore people haven't bothered learning their times tables. And now you have a tool that can write essays for them. So the argument would be, why do I need to learn how to write if the machine can do it for me?
Agreed. It is scary. And on that point, I mean, usually we conclude this way, I kind of listen to what you say and I come up with a quick summary. But what I thought would be interesting to conclude this week would be to feed this into ChatGPT and see what summary it comes up with. So here's the conclusion based on what we've talked about that ChatGPT has come up. But I asked it to come up with a 3 bullet point conclusion based on the fact that we're doing a weekly video on this topic. And it said the 3 key takeaways. Takeaway number 1, ChatGPT is a powerful language model that can generate human-like text. So I think that's pretty fair. That's what we've talked about. And it can be scarily accurate. Number 2, this technology has the potential to revolutionize various industries and could have significant implication for investments, which is obviously what you've just highlighted. And point number 3, which I thought was interesting, it is important to approach the use of ChatGPT and other similar technologies with caution and to consider potential ethical considerations, which are some of the things you mentioned at the end. I couldn't have written it better myself, to be honest. So we will be back next week with our usual catch up. We may or may not use AI to help us with the content. Until then, see you next week.